A few years ago, I made a video showing how my wife and I installed this wire fence in basically a day with zero digging. And since then, I've received a lot of questions like, can you make it shorter? Yes. Can you make it taller? Yes. What gauge is it? 14. What about wind? Fine. Snow? Fine. How are those zip ties doing? Also fine. How do you repair it? What if my ground is rocky and I can't drive those stakes in? How do I add a gate? What about corners? How much did it cost? Where can I buy all this stuff? I want to say this cost somewhere between $300 and $400. Of course, it's been a few years now, so I don't remember exactly. But I have all the products linked at buildingwithblake.com. I also have a Lowe's storefront where I'll link everything that I used, and I'll put those two links in the description here. But I think the first question I should really answer is, after all this time, just how's it doing? And the answer is good. Mostly. Here you can see a couple zip ties that I installed, and I called these temporary at the time, but they have become permanent just due to my laziness. And you can see that they're doing pretty well. They haven't broken. Actually, I don't think any of the many zip ties I've put on here, and there are probably close to 100, none of these things have broken. In the original video, I said that this was just a temporary fence and I was going to install permanent wooden posts like this all over the yard. So far I've done 4, and in my mind that's a pretty good start considering all the stuff that I've had going on. The fence posts themselves have done really well, with a little exception that you can see right there. We had a deer get into the yard. He jumped the fence right about here, and then he ran over to the other side and bashed into it a bunch of times trying to get out. And he came back over here and kind of leaned against this part. He couldn't figure it out. Basically, I think he had trouble seeing the fence and exactly how high it is. I don't know if it's a way that deer's eyeballs work because they're kind of on the side of their heads or what, but he kept trying to jump it. He would not quite get all the way up, and he would just kind of ram it with his knees and his front hooves. Here's one place where he smashed it. Here's another, probably a couple hoof marks there. Smashed it with the knee up there. Again down here. Sometimes I think he head-butted it. Eventually he did get out. I think it was right back here. Kind of pushed it over with his belly when he was jumping over it. I wish I had had my phone nearby so I could have grabbed, some footage of it, but unfortunately it's all up here and I can only just describe it to you guys. Bending these back in place is not too difficult. I just put my foot at the bottom so I didn't loosen up the dirt and moving this thing back and forth. You could also use a brick or something really solid like I did here. Now this one I pull out of the ground so you can see how bent it actually was. I'm going to put it in this vise and then straighten it out. It's going to take a couple different cracks at it from the side. And then the channel itself was kind of puckered, so I just squeezed that back together. In the original video, I mistakenly called these T-posts. I don't know what I was thinking. They are in fact U-posts, and I will probably never live that down. As you can see, they are in the shape of a U. T-posts are different. They're shaped like a T. They're actually stronger than these, but they're not necessary for this particular project. So I stand corrected. Thank you to the thousands of you who pointed out my mistake. U-posts, not T-posts. When I put this back, I put it on the outside of the fence. I really should have alternated the posts inside and outside for added stability. One thing to think about is where you have the fence in relation to the post. Is it on the outside of the post or the inside? Because as one very observant viewer pointed out, these zip ties are the only thing that is holding your fence to the post if it's on the outside. You want to put it on the inside of where an animal is going to press so that the whole fence itself is pressing up against the post as opposed to just being held in place by this little zip tie. Let's talk about corners for a second, because a lot of people have asked, what do I do when I get to a corner? And the answer is pretty simple. You basically just put your post on the inside of the corner, wrap your fence around the outside. You can go ahead and bend it at a 90-degree angle or whatever angle you need to make. It's not difficult to bend, and it will hold that angle that you bend it into. It has pretty good memory, like most steel, and this is just galvanized steel. It will hold that angle, and if it's a 90 degree, it will add a lot of rigidity to your fence. So even if you do a series of 30-degree angles, to get to your 90, you're still adding strength to that wall, any angled wall is going to stand a lot better than a straight wall. If I had installed this in kind of a zigzag pattern, this would have more rigidity to it than just a straight run. If you want to see how to build a gate, I have detailed videos on how to build a very large gate like this. This gate is 8 feet wide. You can drive a vehicle through it. It uses half-lap joinery, and it does require the posts to be dug and anchored in concrete. I also have a video for this gate, which is much smaller, simpler, lighter, and I installed it with zero digging. Will it hold my German Shepherd, Labradoodle, Pit Bull, Doberman, Husky, Lab, Boxer, Vizsla, Malamute, goat, sheep, pig, emu, donkey? A lot of people have asked about what can get in and out of this fence. And as far as dogs are concerned, I would say, I don't know, you know your dog better than I do. Can it jump 4 feet? It's going to get out. Is your dog heavy? It probably will be able to push this fence over in time. You know, does your dog like to test the boundaries of your yard on a regular basis? In which case, eventually they will probably be able to either push this over or, you know, bend it to the point where they can jump over it. My dog is 45 pounds. She's very athletic, but she's not very tall. If it's a larger dog, you know, like a Doberman or a German or something like that, you're taking your chances. If it's livestock, like a full-grown sheep or a goat or something about that size, it's probably heavy enough that if it really wanted to, or if it just wasn't paying attention, it could push this fence over. Maybe not all at once, maybe, you know, 2 or 3 times just kind of leaning up against it, but eventually, you know, its weight is going to win over these stakes. Most critters are going to get through here with no problem. Squirrels, chipmunks, younger rabbits, they're going to run right through these things. The gaps are 2 inches wide, 4 inches tall. I've seen many medium-sized rabbit kind of hop up to this thing and it doesn't look like it's going to fit, and then bloop, it just jumps right through. Is able to elongate its body in such a way that it fits right through these gaps. As far as the different heights go, these fences come in 3, 4, 5, and 6 foot variations depending on the brand. The important thing to remember is that you always want your post to be at least a foot taller than your fence. And I have all this stuff linked below, as well as at buildingwithblake.com. For those really tall ones, you have to ask, how are you going to get your post pounder all the way on top of it to drive it in? Well, you could go the street sign route where they put a stake in the ground and then attach a U-channel to the stake, and then those things can get really tall. We're talking like 8 to 10 feet. But they're more expensive, and you have to order them from a place like Uline. You probably have to cut the stakes yourself. I don't have any personal experience with it, but maybe someday I'll build a basketball court or something. Some people have asked how this fence compares to chicken wire. And I would say chicken wire is more malleable. It bends more easily than this does. However, in some senses, it's actually stronger because the connections are woven. The wires are actually wrapped around each other, as opposed to this, which is a welded connection. And it's not a very strong weld, which is why when the lawnmower has hit it, it's broken it in several places. So if you're planting a garden where you don't want chipmunks and rabbits to be able to get in and eat the vegetables, I would go with a chicken wire because the gaps are going to be much smaller. The larger animals might be able to just push the wire down onto the plants like a deer and get its little snoot in there. So in that case, you might want to go for something that's a little heavier gauge. The greatest threat to these fences is lawnmowers and weed whackers, especially if they're being run by a commercial lawn care service like my neighbors. And that's what happened right here, as a lawnmower kind of came along, clipped the bottom of the fence here and just knocked out a whole bunch of wire. So to fix it, I'm going to take some galvanized wire, and then we're just going to kind of wrap it in 4 directions. So we'll go that way, we'll cross it, and then you can tie it off if you want. It doesn't have to be pretty. Now these bits at the bottom are the toughest because this is where obviously the wire ends, so you're not going to be able to do your crisscross little trick. So one thing we can do is just turn this little guy into a hook. And wrap it around. If we don't want to make a hook here and wrap it all the way around the bottom, there's another thing we can do. Still have to make the hook. But then instead of bringing this bottom wire up to the hook, we'll bring the hook down to the wire. And we'll just do that by wrapping it. But basically, I've just used our hook to loop the wire around the bottom. That one's a bit prettier. If you cut your grass yourself, you shouldn't have to worry about this as long as you're a little bit careful. The only parts of my fence that are damaged are the parts that are adjacent to yards that are cut by commercial lawn services. The parts of the yard that I cut myself, other than the deer headbutting it a few times, the bottom of the fence is perfectly intact because I'm just careful when I'm going up alongside of it. A lot of people have said things like, I live in Arizona or somewhere where the ground is really rocky, and yeah, unfortunately it's true. The method that I used is not going to work in rocky soil, but you do have a couple options. Anchoring a post in rocky ground could really constitute its own video, but here are a couple quick ideas. One idea is to take a post bracket. This is just a 4x4 nominal post bracket in some kind of a stake. I think this is 8 inches. They come in 10, 12 inches and beyond. And that's the idea. We're just going to stake our post bracket into the ground. I'm trying to simulate a rocky surface here. We've been digging and you can see there's a lot of rock. It's not solid, but it's definitely more rock than the previous method that I used could handle. Try to see if we can do it right here on some actual limestone. And obviously a post would go in here and you'd attach it on either side. Here you can see I went pretty much right through that rock. And this is obviously a softer rock than some places, but it's the best I could do for now. If your ground is so solid that you can't even drive a stake into it, you're going to have to drill it. And that sounds a little bit intimidating, but I think you can do it once you understand how it works. First, get a hammer drill with a masonry bit. This is a corded hammer drill. It's not really that expensive. You can also get a cordless hammer drill, which will allow you to go as far away from your power source as you need to. Those are a little more expensive because now you've got batteries involved. Once you've got your holes drilled, you can use a wedge anchor. The way this works is you basically just thread it up through the same post bracket we used in the previous example, add a washer and a nut, thread the nut until it's about flush with the top of that anchor, and then sink this into the hole. Before you do that, you can add some concrete adhesive or some mortar to fill up any empty parts of that cavity. And then you'll crank down on this nut and this wedge at the bottom will expand and lock the anchor into place. Similarly, you can use a threaded rod like this, which is obviously going to be a lot longer, but that means you have to drill deeper, and this is not going to have an anchor that expands when you crank down on it, but it will give you a bit more leverage, for the top of your post. I don't think this is necessarily any better or worse than the anchor. I think the anchor is fine for most applications. In either scenario, you can see that once you put the post into the bracket, there's a little cavity there, and that's because the top of this anchor is preventing the post from sinking entirely flush. And the way you accommodate that is you get a spade bit like this. This is a 1-inch spade bit, and you'll countersink the top of that anchor by just drilling about a 1-inch deep hole, and that will allow the top of that anchor to recess up into this post, and you'll have a nice flush contact area when you tighten this down. And then the easiest method that doesn't involve any post brackets or anchors or threaded rods, anything like that, is just get a piece of steel rebar. This is a 24-inch rod. You can also get 48-inch. You can get even longer than that if you're willing to cut them to length using an angle grinder. And you just sink this right into the hole. You can add, again, concrete adhesive or mortar or something like that. And this actually becomes the post itself. Is this better or worse than any of the other methods? Not necessarily. It's just a matter of what's more important to you, speed or something that looks a little bit nicer. So what's left? I'm sure there's a few questions I forgot. Please keep commenting. I'll do my best to respond to those. If you want to see the original video where we install this fence in basically a day, of course, I'll link that below. Final thoughts for a temporary fence that has become semi-permanent. I couldn't be happier with this. For us, it was pretty easy to install because we did it after a day or two of rain, so the ground was nice and soft.
If you're living in an arid climate or somewhere that the ground is really rocky and dry, this is probably not the solution for you, but there are alternatives. And again, it was probably the least expensive fence we could have chosen. A few people commented, a couple $100. I don't know what your definition of cheap is. Well, you can't get much cheaper than that. It's protected my dog from getting out. It's protected us from other stray dogs getting in. It didn't protect us from that one deer, but that's not really why I chose it. I can't believe that over 1 million of you found this video helpful, but I'm so glad that you did. Thanks for building with me today, and I'll see you on the next project.